This lesson is on error analysis. Error analysis is just that. You're going to analyze errors that the book company, I guess, made. So during this lesson, you're going to see an equation being solved, and there is an error in it somewhere. We have to figure out where that error is. So here we have an equation, and this is solved incorrectly. So this is not solved correctly. So we have to figure out where they went wrong. Well, what I prefer to do with these types of problems is to go ahead and just kind of ignore what they have written down and solve it on my own to see what I get and then compare it. So it might be easy for some of you to just look at it and figure out where they went wrong. However, some of you might just be guessing. If you find yourself that guessing what is wrong, then go ahead and solve it on your own to see what they did incorrectly. Sometimes the mistake is not as obvious. So the first thing I would want to do here is get rid of this 2. This 2 is added on. It's a positive 2. There's no negative in front of it. So this would be plus negative x over 7. So I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. 2 minus 2 is 0. You're left with negative x over 7 is equal to negative 2 minus 2 or plus negative 2. You get negative 4. So I'm going to look at the first step, and their first step looks exactly the same as mine. So I know that the error is not there. The next thing I'm going to do, I have x divided by 7, but there's a negative here. So I'm going to multiply both sides by negative 7. Multiplying both sides by negative 7 takes these 7's away. 7 divided by 7 is 1. Negative times a negative is a positive, so you're left with x is equal to, we have negative 4 times negative 7. A negative times a negative is a positive, so we have x is equal to 28. Now I'm going to look to see what they did incorrectly here. Whenever they multiplied negative 7 on both sides, they came up with negative 28. So here is our error, and you would write a sentence that says, this solution is incorrect because their last step, blah, blah, blah. They came up with negative 28 when it should be positive 28. Now again, if you look down through here and you can see the mistake that they made, then good for you. Good, that's awesome. I'm glad that you can do that. If the mistake is not as obvious, then go ahead and solve this on your own off to the side and then compare your work to the work that they show here. So the first thing I would do, I want to get all of my x's on both sides, and that looks like what they did too. So I'm going to add 2x to both sides. I have 7 minus 2x plus 2x. That would be 0. You're left with 7 over here is equal to 8x plus 14. 6x's plus 2x's is 8x's. Now let me look at the first step here. I can see immediately where they went wrong. So my answer will be, in the second step, I would write a sentence. Write a sentence to explain what they did wrong. In the second step, they subtracted 2x from 6x instead of adding 2x to 6x. So there you go. You found your mistake already. Just remember, when you do answer these questions, you do want to put your final answer in a complete sentence. You want to show the person grading your paper, hey, I know what I'm talking about here. This is what went wrong. You can't just circle it and expect somebody to read your mind. So you have to write that sentence that says, in the second step, they subtracted 2x instead of adding 2x. you can't really predict where the error is going to be in any given problem. Sometimes it's in the final calculation where it's a matter of making sure that you multiply and divide with negatives correctly. Sometimes it's in the procedure. So you really have to analyze each one of the steps. So if you can look down through here and notice where the error is, take a good look at it and see what this last step would be here. This last step here would be to divide both sides by negative 12. So assuming that the rest of it is correct, what would this answer end up being? This is a negative divided by a negative. That should give us a positive here. It should give us a positive. So we found our error. So always look at that last step to see if it is a matter of positives and negatives. But if you don't immediately see that, then please do go ahead and do the problem on your own off to the side and compare your answer to the one that's given. And hopefully you don't get the same answer as they do because their answers are wrong. Remember, we're looking for the errors. In this problem, I'm going to look at this last step first to see, is that correct? If it is, then I know that it's a procedural problem. So we have, it would be divide by both sides by 12, and it would end up to be 2. So now we know that there is a problem up here. The first thing that I'm going to want to do is to get both variables on the same side of the equal sign. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. It looks like they tried to bring the d's over to this side. So they wanted to get rid of the d's here, so they subtracted 5d from both sides. Now, look what happens here. 5d minus 5d is 0. You're left with 11 over here. 7d's minus 5d's, that gives you 2d's minus 13. Now let's look to see what they have. They have 12d's. They added 7 plus 5 instead of subtracted 5d. So this is where their error was. So you want to circle the error and write a sentence that says, in the second step, they added 5d to 7d instead of subtracted 5d from 7d. Make sure you write that final sentence. Okay, so we know that there's at least one error in each one of these. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to look at my last step here. What would my last inverse operation be? It would be to add 28 to both sides. It would be to add 28 to both sides. So I would have minus 28 plus 28. I'd be left with x over here. 28 plus negative 2. 28 plus negative 2, that would be 26. You should end up with x is equal to 26, and they ended up with negative 30. They subtracted 28 from negative 2. So they, instead of adding 28, they subtracted 28. They did not use correct inverse operations. So you would circle where they went wrong, and you would write a sentence that says, in the last step, they did not use inverse operations correctly. They subtracted 28 instead of added 28 to negative 2.